I am Cori Terry, founder and artistic director of Wellspring, Cori Terry and Dancers. I was born in Brooklyn and grew up on Long Island, but I spent those first formative 6 years in Brooklyn, and my mother was very into modern dance. And so my first teacher at 3 years old was Marjorie Mazia, who was an ex-Martha Graham dancer, who was also married to Woody Guthrie, amazingly. And when she left the Graham Company, she opened a studio in Brooklyn that was really close to our house, because I remember we walked there. I studied dance from that very young age of 3, and all the way through my teen years on Long Island. And then I went to the University of Stony Brook, which is further out on the island. And there I met a teacher that she was really the one that sparked it for me, that this was something I really wanted to do. Her name was Catherine Iverson. She was from California. She was just one of those magical, amazing teachers that you just wanted to be near and soak up her energy, because she was awesome. And she took us on a bunch of field trips, and we did all kinds of stuff. We actually saw Eric Hawkins in the city. We took a field trip there in 1971. We didn't know anything about him. She didn't know anything about him either, but she said, the only thing I know about him is that he was married to Martha Graham. And so we said, okay, well, let's give it a try. And that was the beginning of I guess, obsession. A 10-year, let's not call it an obsession, let's call it a devotion to the Hawkins technique. I had never seen anything like it. That was what caught my attention, is because it was so different than anything else I'd ever seen. And we saw a lot of dance. I mean, I lived in New York, and my mother was into dance, so we went to lots of stuff. But when I saw Eric's work, I just was like, wow, that is so interesting. It wasn't the work that got me hooked, it was him. That was the first summer of what they called Wolf Trap at American University in Washington, D.C., which was this huge dance festival thing. And I did it 5 summers in a row. It started out as a total beginner, and by the 5th year I was in the company teaching. And so that first year is when I met Eric. And when I saw Eric and I saw his dancers warming up, that was like, I'm home. Well, the next summer when I went back, I told Eric, I'm going to quit school and move to New York so I can study with you. Then I quit Stony Brook and I moved to New York. So it was only a couple of years that I was just being a student, and then I auditioned and he took me. And so that was amazing. And we were touring a lot during those years. It was the early 70s. One day, Eric called us into the studio, and he would sit on this wooden bench, and we all sat at his feet. And I remember it was December, and he said, we're going on a 6-week winter tour, and the first stop is Kalamazoo, Michigan. And I laughed out loud, because I am a New Yorker, and I had never heard of Kalamazoo, and it sounded like Timbuktu to me. It was hilarious. He looked at me, and immediately he was like, no, Cori, Kalamazoo is a nice city, because at the time, the dance department at Western Michigan University was the modern part of it was all Hawkins. Why we were coming here was because he had this connection with the dance department. And so that was Miller Auditorium. It was January 1978. And then when I was ready to leave New York and to leave Eric's company, it was a handwritten letter to the dance department, to Wendy Cornish, who was the head of the dance department. And I said, Wendy, I'm leaving New York, I'm leaving Eric, do you have a place for me there at Western? And so she hired me for the academic year 1980, 1981. And that's where I met all these great dancers, and we put on a show at K College, which was sold out, and it had live music with Ken Morgan. And afterwards I said to everybody, do you want to do a dance company with me? And they all said yes. And so Wellspring was born. Getting ready to do our very first concert, Ken Morgan did the music, and so we were on the phone trying to figure out, we were making a poster, what are we going to call this show? And one of the words that we had come up with was Wellspring. And so it was called Wellspring, and then it was this fabulous success. And so when it was done, and I said to all the dancers, do you want to do this company? That name stuck, it just stuck. So we formed Wellspring in 1981, even though I was told over and over again by so many different community members in 1981 that this community was not big enough or progressive enough to support a modern dance company. I did not listen to them because I really felt like it was. The tornado came through downtown. A lot of the buildings were still boarded up from the tornado down there, and we found this spot on Michigan Avenue that we transformed into a dance studio. I had help from some of my great friends. I remember we raised the ceiling and then we refinished the floors, and it was a very weird shape, but it worked okay. And we were in that space for, I think it was 2 years. And, but we couldn't perform there, so we had to rent other places to perform. And then Terry Bullard had the ballet company, Kalamazoo Ballet, and I think she approached me and said, do you want to have studios together, because there's this huge space available. So we had, Wellspring was on the corner, and then the Kalamazoo Ballet was next door. Then we got into this rhythm of having the fall show at the Park Trade Center, and then we would rent a space, usually the multimedia room at Western, for the spring, because we needed a bigger space. But then there was a time, I remember, it was right around 1990, the Michigan Council for the Arts, as it was called then, pretty much disassembled. It was taken down by the governor at the time. And they called everybody and said, well, we thought we were going to give you this money, but we can't now because there's no Michigan Council for the Arts anymore. That lasted for about a year. That was when Russ Gabier was the first director of the Gilmore. And I went into him and I was like, we're going to go under. The Michigan Council for the Arts is taken back. They retracted the grant. And he said, well, how much do you need? And I said, $25,000 to get through the year. And he said, well, that's easy. And he writes me a check for $25,000. Said, don't wait so long to come in and ask for this. I was amazed. I had no idea. But if he hadn't done that, we probably would have gone under. I can remember many times where, I'd lay in bed at night and just be freaked out of my mind thinking that Wellspring was going to go under, and every time I would just say to myself, you're going to figure this out. You're going to figure out how to do this. Because I just didn't want to let it go. I just didn't. It was really me. And so I pushed hard for it. And that went on for 16 years. And then finally, the Arts Council put out a thing and said, how many of you people in the arts would be interested in moving in together into a beautiful building? And so we were like, we do. So that was the beginning of the Epic Center. The Epic Center is and was like this brand shiny new modern building with a lot of arts organizations in it. And that was absolutely thrilling to me. And it was actually really and truly a dream come true, because the dream I always had was that we would be part of this community and our shows were going to draw in hundreds of people, and there would be all this activity in the building, people coming and going, and people buying tickets, and that energy that I grew up with in New York, and that energy that I associate with success, I guess, was manifesting itself right in front of me. This was the space that it was going to happen in. And that it did start to happen there. And it has happened there. And that is my favorite feeling in the entire world. More than going on stage. For me, it's like there's audience coming in. The activity, the feeling of being in a bigger city, people taking art seriously, people thinking about it, people being deep and not just wanting superficial entertainment, shall we say. So they're coming in for modern dance, you know, it's just like really what I always wanted. To be a big enough part of the community that would be like music or theater. If I could put everybody who ever danced with Wellspring into one room, what I would say to them is, thank you. For all the energy, for getting up every morning and doing it and being part of it, contributing. So much talent and energy. We've had some great dancers through the years, and we have some great dancers now. It's stunning to think of all the creativity that has gone through the company. So, I mean, really, what I would say is thank you. It's been an amazing career.